Okay. See how we go. Okay. Thanks, Novi. Thanks, Leslie. Good afternoon, colleagues. This afternoon, I'd like to outline the 3 lines of advocacy which our office, the Acicis Secretariat, has been pursuing over the past few years with respect to rebuilding Australia's Indonesia literacy. They are a schools-focused line of advocacy by which we've been attempting to build political momentum behind a new national strategy and restoration of funding for language learning in Australian schools. A line of advocacy relating to onshore language learning in Australian universities, where our focus has been on stimulating domestic student demand for and enrolments in languages at Australian universities through the LCNAU National Languages Campaign. And thirdly, an offshore or in-country learning strand of advocacy, where our focus has been on calling for reforms to the new Colombo Plan to increase the duration of Indo-Pacific learning abroad by NCP students so as to better serve the objective of language learning. Now, I want to address each of these 3 lines of advocacy briefly in turn. So, schools. Our school strategy has been underpinned by investment of time and resources in collecting and centrally aggregating Year 12 languages enrolment data from national and state curriculum authorities. These efforts have helped with coalition building among like-minded individuals and organisations and ensured that our advocacy and proposals to government are grounded upon mutually agreed and understood historical data. A big part of this effort has been designed to excavate past public policy successes in the field of languages education in Australia and to keep these successes prominently in focus in the public discourse and in the minds of current policymakers. And in particular, this has involved repeatedly reminding policymakers of the success of the National Asian Languages and Studies in Australian Schools Strategy, or NAUSIS, between 1995 and 2002. The final thread within this first strand of advocacy in relation to Indonesian language learning in schools has been to formulate and coalition build behind a clear, simple proposal to government about where we need to go next. In 2021 and 2022, a working group involving representatives from Acicis, the Asian Studies Association of Australia and the Asia Education Foundation formulated the following 3-point platform calling for creation of a new national languages policy and strategy, renewal of a systematic national approach to the teaching of Asian languages, and restoration of funding for the teaching of Asian languages in Australian schools back to the level prevailing between 1995 and 2002. Our onshore university strategy, or line of advocacy, has similarly involved collecting and getting out into the public domain historical and current enrolment data for the teaching and learning of languages in Australian universities so that, again, we can argue and advocate from a mutually understood and agreed upon set of numbers. However, at the university level, we've gone a step further and then used this data as the basis for instigating collective action by the Australian universities to try and turn around, to turn the downward trend line around via LCNAU's National Languages Campaign. The Be Your Best Self in Another Language campaign has been designed by advertising firm The Brand Agency and includes a suite of online video, audio and static ads targeted at school leavers, current university students and their parents. The ads aim to raise awareness of both the intrinsic benefits of language learning in terms of the potential for self-discovery and intellectual development, as well as the new or relatively new financial benefits in terms of reduced HECS debt accruing to students who choose to study languages at university under the Commonwealth Government's current HECS help settings. The initial campaign ran from September 2022 to January 2023. The target audiences for the campaign were the approximately 240,000 Australian school leavers, their parents, and the roughly 1.1 million current domestic university students. A second iteration of the National Languages Campaign, using more or less the same set of creative assets, is currently in market as we speak and will run until late February next year, when Australian university students finalise their subject selection. Plans for a third iteration of the campaign over summer 2025-2026 are already well underway. So thirdly and finally, our offshore in-country line of advocacy has, as I mentioned before, involved calling for reforms to the new Colombo Plan in order to increase the duration of time that Australian university students spend in country while on an NCP-funded experience, so as to better serve the objective of language learning. Specifically, we've been arguing for the institution of what we have called NCP MP Plus funding. In 2019, according to the 2018-19 budget papers, the Australian government spent $51 million on the new Colombo Plan. In the same year, according to the Australian International Directors Forum, 15,500 Australian undergraduate students, the target cohort of the NCP, undertook Indo-Pacific-based learning abroad experiences. Of these, approximately 1,800, or 11% of these experiences, were domestic undergrads on a semester or full year of study in the Indo-Pacific. Averaging this figure out across Australia's 42 universities, in 2019, we had an average of 40 domestic undergrad students per uni on Indo-Pacific experiences of a semester or longer. Now, we're arguing for the Australian government to create a revenue signal and a financial incentive that rewards those Australian universities that go to the trouble of creating curriculum-embedded pathways to a semester in the Indo-Pacific, akin to UTS's Bachelor of International Studies program and ANU's Semester in Asia, Year in Asia program. NCP MP Plus funding would be provided to Australian universities or faculties therein on a contingent per student basis upon demonstration of successful placement of an Australian student in the Indo-Pacific for at least a trimester or semester. Under NCP MP Plus, a domestic student undertaking a semester in the Indo-Pacific would receive the same $10,000 mobility grant that they're currently receiving under the NCP mobility program's existing settings. However, the student's home Australian university would also receive $5,000 in top-up institutional funding per student at a total cost to the Australian government of $15,000 per Indo-Pacific semester experience. Now, under these settings, a university or faculty sending the 2019 national average of 40 domestic undergrad students a year to the Indo-Pacific for a semester would receive $200,000 in NCP MP Plus top-up institutional funding. A faculty sending 80 students a year would receive $400,000 in institutional funding. NCP MP Plus funding for universities would cost the Australian government $9 million in 2025, rising to $21 million in 2029, and would provide for a doubling in the annual number of Australian university students undertaking semester or full year learning abroad in the Indo-Pacific within 5 years, from the current 2019 baseline of 1,800 students to 3,600 students in 2029. So, to recap, Acicis has been pursuing 3 lines of advocacy in order to rebuild Australia's Indonesia literacy. First, advocating for a new national languages policy for schools. Second, trying to stimulate domestic student enrolments in onshore language learning at Australian universities via the LCNAU National Languages Campaign. And third, advocating for reforms to the new Colombo Plan in order to increase the number of Australian university students undertaking semester and full year in-country study in the Indo-Pacific, including in Indonesia. Thank you. That's all I have time for. I hope that was of interest and useful to the discussion and Q&A session later. I'm really sorry not to be there in person to participate. I feel I'm missing out. Thanks again.